We're here today because Congresswoman Hooley refuses to take a position on the Colombia Free Trade Agreement. Given the ongoing human rights violations in Colombia, this is highly offensive to working people. Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Arthur Stamolis. I direct the Oregon Fair Trade Campaign, which is a statewide coalition of labor, environmental, and human rights groups that opposes NAFTA-style trade agreements. Thank you again for being here. Thank you to the steelworkers, Jobs with Justice, Witness for Peace, the Carpenters, and PCASC for bringing so many people out today and for helping with this event. I think most of you know Colombia is the deadliest country in the world to be a union member. Paramilitary death squads routinely kidnap, torture, and murder people in Colombia for speaking out in favor of better working conditions, just like we're doing here today. Since 1991, 2,300 trade unionists have been murdered there. And what we often hear from offices like Hooley's is, well, you know, the number of assassinations happening each year, it's down from its historic highs. What they don't tell you is that the number of murders is still the highest in the world in Colombia, that 97% of the murderers continue to walk the streets with complete impunity, free to terrorize other people. And what they especially don't tell you is that all this violence is having its intended effect. The number of deaths in Colombia has driven down the unionization rate to the lowest rate in Latin America. Only 1% of Colombians are now working under a collective bargaining agreement. The other thing they don't mention is that the connections between these paramilitary death squads and the Colombian government reach the highest levels. Just last month, the Colombian president's cousin was arrested trying to flee the country after a warrant was issued for his connections to the death squads. And this wasn't just some distant relative. This was the president's closest political advisor, the man who co-founded their political party with him. And it's not just that. The president's Central Intelligence Chief has been convicted for giving the names of union members to the death squads for assassination. And large numbers of high-ranking officials in Colombia are under investigation for their connections to the death squads, including the president himself. It's extremely outrageous that Hooley is even considering this trade deal. And, you know, she's really standing alone among Democrats in doing so. Earl Blumenauer, Peter DeFazio, David Wu, they all oppose this. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they both oppose it. Steve Novick and Jeff Merkley both oppose it. And, you know, some of these people, like Peter DeFazio, are fair trade champions who always vote the right way on trade agreements. But a lot of these people are free traders who almost never vote with us. Even they oppose the Colombia Free Trade Agreement because they recognize trade can't be free when working people are killed for expressing their freedom of speech and their freedom of assembly. So we're here today to tell Hooley she doesn't have a free pass on this. She's the only one who doesn't understand the connection between trade and human rights. She's the only one who's willing to side with the Bush administration on this. We gotta let her know she doesn't have a free pass just because she's on the way out of office to side with human rights violators in Colombia. She doesn't have a free pass to side with businesses that are gonna offshore Oregon jobs. And she doesn't have a free pass to side with the president. Congresswoman Hooley, can't you see? Without worker rights, the trade ain't free. Congresswoman Hooley, can't you see? Without worker rights, the trade ain't free. Now we're going to hear from Ron Rogers with the Steelworkers, a union that's not only opposed each and every one of these free trade agreements that shipped our jobs overseas, but that's also stood up in solidarity with our union brothers and sisters in Colombia.
All these free trade agreements, even without the human rights violations that are going on in Colombia, have done nothing but devastate the manufacturing jobs in this country. And that alone should be enough for Congresswoman Hooley to understand that this is not good legislation to sign on for. But you couple that with the fact of the atrocities that go on and the human rights violations and the record of Colombia, this is a no-brainer. If Congresswoman Hooley wants to show complacency, in my book, that's the same as guilt. If you buy stolen goods for that you know are stolen, you are just as guilty of the theft. If you support free trade deals that support these juntas that go out and kill union workers for their God-given right you are complacent and you are just as guilty. If that's the legacy that she wants to leave on her time serving this country, then so be it. But for me, I'm just disappointed, I'm disheartened. If she can't make an easy decision, I wonder how she ever made the hard ones.
Colombia, Korea, Panama, Peru. Workers saying no. What about you? Colombia, Korea, Panama, Peru. Workers saying no. What about you?
And our next speaker is Daniel Bonham with the Carpenters. Thank you to the Carpenters for being out here today. We really appreciate it. Daniel was actually just in Colombia about a year ago, so he not only brings the perspective of a working union member in this country, but is someone who's spoken with unionists in Colombia and understands what this trade agreement would do to them.
There's a lot of things that I'd like to be talking about today that I'm not going to be able to talk about at any kind of length. One of them is the fact that these trade agreements, all of them, have provisions in them that make it possible for foreign companies to come into the United States, into Oregon, and challenge our prevailing wage laws. I'd like to talk about that a little bit more, but unfortunately we can't really talk about that today because we've got to talk about something a lot more important, and that is the human rights violations down there. As Arthur mentioned, I was in Colombia a while back. You know, I just don't get this, why Darlene Hooley or anybody who says that they're for working people, whether it be in the United States or anywhere else, could possibly support the Colombia Free Trade, or at least not come out against it. And I got to tell you why. I was talking to some people in her office, and they were saying that, well, things have gotten better there. That's ludicrous. I mean, that's the silliest thing I have ever heard. Better than what? Okay? Maybe they're only killing 22 people so far this year, which is a fact. They've only killed 22 people so far this year.
23.
20, oh, I'm sorry. Was there another? God. Okay, well, anyway, while I was down in Colombia, we were talking to the teachers union, and that day, a teacher had been murdered for being a union representative. Now, somebody also said from Darlene's office that, well, Colombia is a really violent country. It's safer to be a union member than not. I don't know where they're getting that from the Bush administration, from the Uribe government. It doesn't matter. It's got to stop, and any kind of support or even acquiescence or silence about this issue has got to stop. So anyway, I'd like to be able to, in the future, be able to talk to whoever the next representative is about the economic issues. But let's get this Colombia thing out of the way and quit even talking about the possibility of supporting an agreement for a country where it's a death knell to be a union member. For somebody like me to be down there, you have to be worried about getting killed at any time.
Hooley, get off it! These trade deals for corporate profit! Hooley, get off it! These trade deals are for corporate profit! Hooley, get off it! These trade deals are for corporate profit! Hooley, get off it! These trade deals are for corporate profit! Hooley. Second to last speaker is Beth Petit, the Director of Witness for Peace Northwest, who's brought a number of Colombian human rights activists up to Oregon to talk to people, including the people in Representative Hooley's office. Just last week, we had a woman whose husband was assassinated come in and speak with Darlene Hooley's staff, who herself came under attack this January. And so far, these pleas have fallen on deaf ears. And so, Beth, please.
Well, this is so heartening to see so many people out here today. I'm actually going to Colombia in a month. I'm leading a delegation to look at how the free trade agreement is going to impact particularly small farmers and working people there. I'm going to take the photos from this event and share them with the people in Colombia so they know that we here in the United States know what's going on and care about them. So I'm really thankful that you're here today. I want to give just kind of a quick context to what everyone else has been talking about, just so we're all really clear. A civil war has been going on in Colombia for over 40 years. In the last 7 years, the United States government, our tax dollars, have been sent to Colombia, mostly in the form of military aid. Over $5 billion in military aid to Colombia, which is being used to kill union leaders, to commit atrocities, human rights violations. What's happening to Colombian farmers and what is the fear what will happen with the free trade agreement, which we haven't yet talked about today, is that it will decimate their economy. We saw what happened with NAFTA, right? We all know that Mexican corn farmers lost their jobs because of U.S. subsidized agricultural products that were imported into Mexico. The same thing is now happening in Central America because of the Central American Free Trade Agreement, and the same thing will happen in Colombia. But what we have to understand is that this is in the context of when you can't get your products to market because there are no roads, and when people are threatening you, what are you going to do? If you can no longer grow your own corn and beans and rice and sell it at a fair price, and you're out of work, what's going to happen? People are either going to join the drug trade, they're going to get involved in the violence, they're going to be involved in petty crime, or they're going to be displaced. 3 million Colombians out of a country of about 40 million people have been forced from their homes because of the violence. That's the second highest number in the world, only to Sudan because of what's been going on in Darfur. Nobody knows that in the United States. It's a humanitarian crisis, and this is only going to become worse if the free trade agreement passes. So as Arthur said, we brought human rights defenders, women's leaders, campesinos to talk with Darlene Hooley's staff several times over the past 3 years, and it's completely ludicrous that she has not taken a position in opposition to this free trade agreement. Like Arthur said, I don't know what else we can do. These are real human beings who are going to lose their lives because of this free trade agreement. Not to mention the devastation it will have on our economy here in Oregon and throughout the United States. So let's, I don't know, maybe we should have one more chant. And I want to just, before we do that, close with one thing. Maria Ruth, who was here last week, this human rights defender, she said, she pled, she was crying when she was in Darlene Hooley's office, and she said, we don't want you to abandon us. We don't want more war, and we do not want this free trade agreement. And that's the message that the Colombian people want to bring to the U.S. Congress.
Colombia, Korea, Panama, Peru, workers say no. What about you?
Colombia, Korea, Panama, Peru, workers say no. What about you, Darlene? So in Jobs with Justice, we've been fighting against the whole free trade corporate agenda for years, and we're going to keep doing it with all of you. So I wanted to just bring out a couple of things that we're doing that I think everyone should know about. One of them is there's a campaign going on for president, and we want to make sure that we bring up the issue of trade and corporate managed trade during this campaign. Yeah. It's an opportunity to do it. So even Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are saying they want to look at NAFTA again. That's a good sign, and the reason they're saying it is not necessarily because they just thought it themselves. It's because of us. It's because all of us for years have been bringing up these issues. So let's use this opportunity to keep pushing on the candidates to take an anti-corporate position, because we know the corporations are going to be pushing hard on them.
Hey, hey, what do you say? Down with the Colombia FTA! Hey, hey, what do you say? Down with the Colombia FTA! Hey, hey, what do you say? Down with the Colombia FTA!
Corporate economic globalization is destabilizing workers all over the country, including here in the United States. And as workers have less and less opportunities, economic opportunities, they're going to move. I mean, how many folks who live here in Oregon actually were born here in Oregon? Migration is a natural pattern. Migration is what people do to survive economically. And when the United States engages in policies, not only economic policies, but military and political policies that force people into poverty, into destitution, into not being able to create an economic base for themselves, they're going to move. And some of them move within their country, and some of them come to places like the United States where there is more economic opportunity. And I think people need to understand that the policies of the United States abroad do come back to kick us in the butt. And I think migration and immigration is a natural phenomena. It's not anything that I think should be labeled illegal or should be labeled something as wrong. It's workers moving to find jobs and to better their livelihoods and their families. And so in terms of the relationship between specifically free trade agreements, I think NAFTA is a perfect example. NAFTA ensured that multinational corporations could set up shop along the border in Mexico, and it ensured that United States subsidized agricultural corn and now soybeans and rice are flooding the markets in Mexico, so Mexican small farmers can't compete. And so what do? They migrate. They migrate so that they can make a living. Where do they go? Usually they go to this, Mexico City. Sometimes they go to northern Mexico to work in agricultural fields. But a lot of people have come to the United States. They're doing it not to be criminals, not to do anything illegal. They're doing it to survive. The free trade agreements are just the most recent iteration of what United States intervention, economic, political, and military look like in the world. And so I think we should also keep in mind that there's a bigger issue going on. For example, the war in Iraq. That is something that we've got to understand is part of a bigger policy. And we hear now that there are a lot of Iraqi refugees who are waiting to come to the United States because they've done political work in support of the United States, et cetera, et cetera. So they're facing their own immigration crisis. And we've got to, I think, take a real long and hard look at the impact of our military, economic and political policy and those effects. Migration, I think, is just a natural outcome of that, and I don't think that we should punish folks who are just trying to survive. I think we should take a long, hard look at folks who are creating these policies in the first place.
We're finally figuring out what's happened to us about these trade deals and immigration. And it turns out that in the 70s, business started up this idea that in Latin America they call it neoliberalism, or the conservative consensus, or the Chicago school thought up a lot of it, and it's all about cutting wages, cutting services, cutting government, moving jobs to the lowest wage area of the country they can do, cheap production, and all about pushing the market and pushing corporate power. And it's hurting us, and it's hurting people in other countries, and it really needs to be turned around. That's the deal.
And people are starting to see that, you say?
People are seeing it, and and immigration is a little bitty part of it.
These trade deals for corporate profit.
And it's part of it, but the main thing is it's all about corporate profit, like they're saying.
Right.
And that's what it's about. People all over the country are catching on, and I think we're going to turn this thing around.